Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to a very rainy March edition of Molten Music Monthly. So in case you're new to the whole Molten Monthly thing, and we've had a shed load of subscribers over the past month or so, welcome. You're very, very welcome here. So this is where I look over the last month and pick out half a dozen or so really interesting music technology things. It could be modular, could be synthesis, could be hardware, could be software, could be computer related, all of it. Something, somewhere to do with music technology, which is what we live and breathe. And March has been quite a month. Well, quite a month for me personally. I'm not too sure about the industry as a whole, but if you've been following my little journey, then you may recall that I was going to make March the music making month, the month of modular music, that I was going to produce a track kind of every other day. And then I completely bottled it and decided that it's just not going to happen. I wasn't capable of producing that sort of music. I didn't have the time, I didn't have the equipment, I didn't know what I was doing. You know, that kind of thing. But then, in some kind of awesomely serendipitous fashion, I got a call from Phil at Law & Order Records asking if I'd like to contribute a track to the next Modulalism CD album thingy, to which I said, yeah, okay. And that then sent me full force into having to come up with an actual track, a song, if you like, a track of modular music of about 4 to 6 minutes long. And that has been the most fantastic adventure ever. It's all done. I submitted the track just the other day and I will tell you a little bit more about it at the end of this video. So coming up in this month's edition, we have N-Track Studio and Tracktion Waveform both hit version 9. Mutable Instruments give us Plaits, which is so much less complicated than braids. Behringer pull out a Pro One. Google reinvent the Chaos Pad with some NSynth super thingy. Nektar get in on the MIDI foot controller game. Wave Indiegogo some MIDI jewelry. WMD get all rock and roll with the Mantic Conceptual Flex. Roland release the not so thankfully green TR-8S. Golt release the terribly named Red Light District sequencer. And we get all whimsical with the Wurslash. The Wurslash. That sounds like plenty. Let's get on with it. N-Track. Now this has been around for donkey's years. It's been around forever. It came into being in about 1995. This was before there was Cubase audio, before Logic had audio. I think even before Pro Tools was probably invented. And it was doing multi-track on the PC, on Windows. It was pretty basic. It didn't really have an interface. You just recorded and it had a couple of levels to change the level, but that's what the guy developed it was after. He just wanted multi-track on his computer because he couldn't afford a proper 4-track studio on cassette. So he thought, I know, I'll just invent a digital audio workstation. Good job. N-Track then moved on to a more graphical thing. It was kind of very shiny, very metallic looking. It kind of had the feel of Cakewalk about it, I always thought. And then it kind of stayed that way for decades until about 2009 when they released a version for the Mac OS, at which point it seemed to get it reinvigorated. And now with version 9, so there must have been some other versions along the line somewhere, version 9 is now a pretty capable DAW and it looks far, far better, far more modern and flat and interesting. In fact, it looks a lot like Sonar should have looked if Cakewalk knew anything about GUI design. It's now available on Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android, pretty much everything. It supports everything, VST plugins, AU plugins, comes with a bunch of interesting instruments and features and stuff, and it's kind of a fully fledged DAW that everyone more or less ignores, which is a shame because it's good, it's cheap at about 69 euros, seems to have a new lease of life and is definitely worth checking out if you're in the market for another way of looking at a DAW. Talking of other ways of looking at DAWs, Tracktion Waveform 9. Now, we've known about this for a little while. They've had the beta version out there for a bit, but it's now officially released and is well worth your time. It's not the prettiest, it's not the most fantastic to look at, although they are adjusting that with every new release. It just looks that little bit better, but it has a different way of working. It has this one window approach that has kind of a signal flow from left to right. So all your inputs are on the left, obviously, your data splashed around the project page in the middle. but then all of your signal goes through the outputs at the other end, and it doesn't really matter what sort of track it is, MIDI or audio, because it gets turned to audio at the end, because we ultimately end up hearing something. And so on the right hand side, you have all these sort of blocks, these modules of blocks that go into the signal chain, whether it's a fader, a meter, an effect, a plugin of some kind, and it just creates this quite interesting left to right workflow. Whereas in most DAWs, all of that signal chain is kind of dumped into a console, into the mixer, where you then go up and down as opposed to left and right, which is, when you think about it, very counterintuitive, considering that your project is always scrolling from left to right. So the way Tracktion did it, the way they've done it in Waveform and all the previous versions, is that they've just followed the natural flow, and that gets quite interesting once you get the hang of it. They have introduced a mixer now. They didn't have a mixer because it wasn't really required, they thought. I felt like they relented against public pressure to have a mixer, and so in version 8 they finally introduced one. But with version 9, they're really pushing the envelope. They've made it very modular. You can customize it as much as you like and plug in all sorts of different sort of mixer console aspects into it. So it's not just giving you fader control, it's giving you a lot of other possibilities. And that's the thing with Waveform, it's packed full of possibilities. You can, on the surface of it, just use it as a DAW, record stuff in, mix it, edit it, that kind of thing. But built in, it has an enormous amount of power under the hood. It has a complete sort of plug-in modular system that you can wire together signal and route stuff from here, there, and everywhere to create these enormous kind of chains of plugins and stuff. It also, in version 9, has a front panel designer which allows you to create your own user interface for whatever plugins you want and just put the knobs on there that you want to use. The other really cool thing I like is their use of LFO. Now, they've always had this bin of LFOs up on the top right that you just drag onto any parameter you like, anything, anywhere, it doesn't matter, just drop an LFO on it and it starts wanging around. Well, they've developed that now to include a whole bunch of different sort of modifiers, a bit like Bitwig, I suppose, where you have a step one, a random one, a funny shaped one, and you can apply those to anything you like, anywhere at all. It's really extraordinarily powerful. I did a full review of version 7 a couple of years ago, and that's well worth checking out if you want to have an idea of what Tracktion, or what now they call Waveform, what that does, how it works, how the signal flow works, how the MIDI and audio, the difference between that and the editing and all those sorts of bits works. It's got stuff in there that you can't really explain without looking at it and being shown it, because you don't find these sorts of things in any other DAW. It starts at $109 and is absolutely worthwhile checking out. Again, if you're in the market for another DAW, or you want to look at an alternative way of doing things, or you're looking for a deeper recording and music production experience, then check out Waveform 9. When I first started talking to people about modular and asking people's advice on what sort of modules I should get to start with, they would say over and over again that you need the Mutable Instruments braids. Now, to me, coming into modular, what I wanted was the exact opposite of braids. I wanted an oscillator that had, the knobs for the controls. The last thing I wanted was a menu system or a display or anything that was multifunctional within a single unit. I wanted one function per module. That was what I was after. That's what I envisaged modular to be all about. And so I didn't take that advice. I completely ignored the braids. And it turns out that Mutable didn't really like it either, and they discontinued it last year. But now we have the replacement. It's called plaits, as in hair plaiting, like the braid plaiting. I suppose, I don't know if it has any other relevance other than something to do with hair. But the good news is that it's pretty fabulous. It's still a multifunctional oscillator. It's still got a whole stack of different sounds in there, but they are so much more accessible. They are right there on the front panel. You just dial it up. These lights that go up and down and show you what you've selected. It looks dead easy to use. It has the parameters front and center. You're no longer diving around trying to work out what the heck is going on. And of course, absolutely everyone has one now. So that means I'm probably just going to avoid it out of spite, I imagine. But if you're starting off in modular, then, there's a lot of value in something like the Plaits, which has got a shed load of different sort of sounds in it that you can get your teeth stuck into, and it looks dead easy to use. The Behringer cloning monster plows on, and this time it has desecrated the memory of sequential circuits. Pictures have appeared of the Behringer Pro One, and to be honest, I'm probably a little bit excited about this one. I mean, I've always wanted a sequential synth. The Prophet 5 was the synth I wanted, the synth of my dreams, the synth of my childhood, the one that I really wanted to possess, and the one, of course, that I was always disappointed when I got software versions that just didn't seem to capture it somehow. And of course, I'd never be able to afford the real thing. So this Behringer Pro One looks pretty interesting. It might be the one that will tip me over the edge into buying a piece of Behringer synthesizer kit. I would honestly prefer it to be in a keyboard format rather than all this desktop business, because I don't want to stick it in my rack. I'd rather have it separate as a little monosynth by itself, but you know, you can't have everything. But I think perhaps this is the one that's going to tickle my nostalgia gland the most, and should be coming soon. So what's all this about Google and a synthesizer then? Well, it's not so much Google, it's more of a research team within Google called Magenta, who's been tasked with exploring machine learning and how it can help in arts and crafts and music and stuff. So basically they get to dream up new ways of using music technology. I mean, what a cool job is that? Let's all go and work there, that's what I say. But anyway, they've been playing around with this NSynth algorithm. The NSynth algorithm takes a sound source and then sort of discovers and learns the characteristics of that sound source, and then goes and creates a shed load of sounds along those sorts of lines, using those characteristics and applying it to something and then generating a bunch of sounds. So with this particular project, they've taken 16 sort of simple samples of instruments, and from that, the algorithm has extracted something like 100,000 sounds. Now I imagine that sort of 99,000 of those sounds are going to sound pretty similar, I would suggest. But in there somewhere, I'm sure, must be some interesting combinations of sounds. I mean, it does seem to be a little bit like physical modelling or acoustic modelling, where you're sort of making a model of a sound and then applying that characteristic to create new and interesting different sounds. But apparently, no, this is different. This is machine learning, it's algorithms, it's artificial intelligence using characteristics and then extrapolating and applying those to other things. Or something. But the reality of it, how it has manifested itself into the physical realm, is kind of what looks everything like a Korg Chaos pad. So they've built it into this box to give you a user interface and, you know, some way of interacting with it. And you can move your finger around, and that then sort of morphs between 4 different sounds in the corners and gives you all of those sounds generated in between. Sounds kind of interesting, not mind-blowing. I don't think we're completely there yet, but it is an open source project, so you could get in there and build your own and try it out for yourself. But who knows what this kind of research, and certainly this sort of investment, could conjure up down the line. The Nektar Pacer. Now, weren't Pacers those sort of green, chewy sweets? Anyway, Nektar usually build big keyboard controllers, MIDI controllers, with keyboards and knobs and things on them, and they map them very intelligently to parameters indoors and things like that. Well, now they've decided that they wanted to create something for a keyboard player's feet to do, because, you know, largely unused, a little bit of sustain on and off maybe, but when your hands are playing an instrument, maybe you could be changing patches with your feet. So they looked at doing something like that and very soon discovered that actually this is applicable to a whole lot more than just a keyboard player. And so they kind of went down a guitarist rabbit hole, and they've come out with this rather smart looking MIDI controller pedal board thingy. It's all buttons at the moment. You can add expression pedals in the back, plug a couple of those in. You can also add more foot switches. But they've designed it to do more than just MIDI. It will also switch relays on guitar amplifiers and effects boxes, so you can wire those all in. And they've integrated their transport control over various doors. So that's all labeled out on the foot switches. You can press play, record, select different tracks. I'm moving my foot as I do this, but you can't see that. There's my foot. I'm moving it around to demonstrate that. Oh. And it looks like quite a nifty and useful thing. Select different presets, select different parameters, enable tracks. As I've said, you've got MIDI control, you've got relay switch control, you can stick it all into your DAW, you can stick it through different software effects. It's got profiles for, you know, line 6 gear and other bits of sort of digital guitarist hardware. And I mean, they've tried to encompass the whole world of control in through your feet. So if that's the sort of thing you need hands-free control over all load of stuff, then this looks like something worth checking out. Wearable tech is usually kind of uniformly a bit crap. I often associate it with aching arms and feeling like a bit of a twit when you're waving and sort of gesticulating at your computer during a performance. However, Genki Instruments have ploughed on nonetheless and have released this piece of sort of MIDI jewelry, this ring that they're calling Wave, which is nice. And they seem to somehow be surfing a line along something which is cool and usable without falling into sort of the naff side or the disaster side. I mean, it sort of looks weirdly lovely, although not in the video. In the video, if you're watching this somewhere around here, then that looks a bit crap actually. But the renders they've done of what it will look like once they've finished this prototyping stage is really quite spacey and lovely. I mean, I guess it all amounts to the usual familiar thing where you go, ooh, you know, filter cut off, modulation, whoa, and reverse, or speed or something. I don't know, you're going to wave your hand about, aren't you, whatever happens. But what I quite liked about it in the videos was that, playing keyboards, he was able to make controls just by moving your hand a little bit. I mean, I've played with virtual reality, I've played with Leap Motion and things like that, and you've just got your arms up here, you're trying to get something to happen, and it's just exhausting and stupid, and you feel, oh, I never quite get into it. But this seemed to have something a bit more to it. I like the fact that I'm not wearing a glove, or I like the fact that I actually have something which is, rather than just moving around in space, I have something which I seem to be using, and that seems to me to be important. It's like, playing the difference between playing air guitar and actually playing guitar, if you know what I mean. And I also like the tapping element, the fact that you could sort of trigger it through taps as well as moving it in different dimensions. Is that what we're going to be doing? I don't know. The more I talk about it, the more stupid it appears. However, the other really cool factor is that they've developed, or they are developing, a Eurorack module for it. Because I'm a sucker for anything Eurorack now. And so they've created this little Bluetooth module which it will connect to and allow you to control modulation and synths and CV and stuff by waving your hand. Now that is actually useful. Useful so that I can have some kind of manual control over CV. Just like that, without having to fiddle around with another module or wire up another LFO, I can just sort of move my hand around to make some interesting changes. That really appeals to me. It's on Indiegogo. They have reached their funding goal, so the thing is going to be made, all being well, but there still are some early bird discounts to be had. So if that's something that floats your creative boat, then go and check it out. WMD have got together with Mantic and have stuffed a seriously rock and roll distortion pedal into a Eurorack module. It uses phase-locked loop technology in order to generate kind of a harmony of square waves which then bash each other's heads in order to remain phase-locked to the original signal. It's essentially a module that generates an argument that doesn't end well in any respect. It creates chaos in like a fiercely unpredictable and distorted way, and it seems like the perfect thing if you're looking to make your Eurorack scream. Is a new Roland drum machine thingy, and it's not in that horrible Ira green. Yay! The TR-8S is of course a drum machine, and it comes with the finest, if not quite authentic ACB modelled TR-808 and 909 sounds. What does it mean? Oh, it's Roland's software versions of the 808 and 909 sounds, and that's all packed in there using their ACB modelling technology. And it will sound as authentic as anything else, as good as anything else, because Roland do this sort of thing really, really well. Of course, can you tell the difference? Oh yes, absolutely, if you're some kind of complete drum machine nerd, but for most of us, it will just sound fabulous. But that's only half of it. Along with the ACB sounds, you can also sample directly into it. You can stick your own samples in, mix and match, customize, create your own drum kits of whatever sort of noises that you like. Because of course it doesn't have to be drum noises. It could be whatever samples you want. It sort of evolves it into an entire groove box where you can be sticking in bass lines, noises, awk hits. It's a next generation rhythm composer that has the nostalgia of the 808 909 kind of vibe thing going on, along with all the latest stuff you want to pump into it. It's a good idea, Roland. It's a great idea to drop the green, and it's a good idea to release a sampling groove box drum machine thingy, the TR-8S. It's what all the kids are going to be playing on. So I guess this has a lot of red LEDs as opposed to it having some kind of seedy sex industry tie-in, but it's not going to do anybody Googling it any favors. But anyway, it's a massively wide sequencer. It's a step sequencer. It sort of took a little bit of understanding to start with when it first appeared because, you know, the bloke who developed it, this happens a lot. When manufacturers or developers are very close to their products, its functionality seems completely obvious to them because they've been working on it for years. Whereas for actual people coming along to say, so what's it about? The basic idea can often be completely lost. But what this is a massively wide 32-step sort of gate sequencer with a 12-step pitch sequencer built in. No, that's not explaining it very well. You've got 32 steps, right? Each one of them has got a switch. You can switch them on or off. So rather than that reducing the length of the sequence, it just pauses on those steps. You're kind of putting in rests, if you like you would on a TB303, for instance. It's that style of sequencing. So you have note on and you have rests. So you create this quite elaborate pattern of steps, if you like. And none of this currently has anything to do with pitch. It's purely to do with gate. Each one of those steps also has a note length, sort of a note on, note off, that you can change and have control over. So you can create quite an intricate and interesting pattern of gating going on. And then whenever there's a note that's on, that is directed to the pitch sequencer, where you've got 12 knobs to select 12 different pitches, and it will step through those one at a time as it goes along. So if you turn on all 32 notes, it will go through all 12 notes, then all through 12 notes again, and then through another 8. Or something, and then it will loop around again, kind of strangely out of sync. But the point of this is that the developer said that if you've got 32 steps within a bar of music, you're very rarely going to use more than 12 notes within a bar. And that's sort of true, I suppose. And so perhaps it's better to see it as a 1-bar sequencer that has got 32 step resolution to it over 12 notes. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Anyway, there's a second row of 12 notes again, but that's actually designed more for CV. So you'd have the top row of 12 controlling notes and the bottom row of 12 controlling, say, I don't know, let's say the filter cutoff, shall we? So it's a really quite interesting device. And I imagine in performance, it's very hands-on and creative the way you can very easily patternize things. You can also split it into 2 lots of 16 steps, which gives you some option to change between different patterns of things, which sounds pretty awesome. On the other hand, it is an enormous module for essentially controlling one sound. But that's the Red Light District sequencer. Google it if you dare. There always seems to be a lot of new modular modules about, and I can't really go into detail on them all, but just a handful of other releases were like the Wobbler crazy LFO thing from Thank God It's Friday. No, from Today Is Not, no, it's This Is Not Rocket Science, that's right, TINS. The Wobbler LFO looks crazy, go and give that a go. Future Retro have released the Transient Plus, which is a kind of a mad digital drum module that's got a whole load of samples packed into it and interesting things, and it looks like one of the most gorgeous modules I have ever seen. Those knobs and that front panel design, it's just lovely, something terribly lovely about it. Soma Labs have taken the FX out of their weird Lyra 8 synthesizer thing, you know, the one that they said they discovered the plans for in some old Soviet bunker, and it had something to do with whale song and a combination of materials found in Atlantis or on the moon or something. I don't know. Anyway, they've taken the effects from that, which is, you know, kind of warbly, reverby, delay, crazy type effects, and jammed it into a Eurorack module. So that looks interesting. Another interesting thing is the ALAC polygonal, oh God, polygonal pattern-based sequencer thing. It's a circle of lights, right? Circle of lights that you can create shapes on. So the lights light up as a square, and then you can rotate that square around, or you can make it a triangle of lights, put that around a line or a polygon, hexagon, whatever. And it looks quite interesting. You've just got a circle that's going round and it's only triggering on these shapes, and you've got 4 channels of it in the single module. Yeah, quite fascinating. I like that, moving those things around to create different things. It's kind of using visual clues to generate patterns rather than just deciding where they're going to go. Yeah, interesting. And lastly, Mannequins by Whimsical Raps released the Wslash. Apparently it's pronounced with, of course, obviously. And it's some kind of weird sort of tape-inspired sampler playback tape head thingy. Quite a lot of people seem to have bought it sort of immediately and have posted onto various groups about who? They get quite quizzical about it. There seems to be something there, but they're not entirely sure what it is or what it does or why it did it. Well, the website says that it sort of takes a nowness and returns it in a future now. 8 hours of audio sculpture to be recorded in and over and around. Infuses conversations fold a fresh context for renewed identity. Awesome. I can't really read this anymore, it's so rainy. So a quick update on my modular track then that I submitted just the other day. I got there, I did it. I wrangled my way through a couple of weeks was all I had, and I somehow managed to pull something out of the bag, or kind of. I ended up with four tracks that I thought were doable, good enough, possible contenders, and then I just picked my favourite one, the crazy one in the end, I thought, because it had the most stuff going on, and I thought I like stuff going on, more or less. And that will now appear on the new Modulism Volume 2 CD, which will be out at some point. I have no idea when, but that sounds pretty exciting to me. And I've learned a huge amount about my rig, about doing stuff, about getting stuff to work. I mean, the way that I approached it in the end was that I wanted to do it in a single performance. So I would start rigging something up, patch something together, like the sound of that, patch more in, until I got something that would just like going off, I suppose. And then I would do like 6-minute recordings into the computer on 8 tracks all going at once. So I had a little bit more control over what was on and off at various times because I don't have enough mixing facility on my rig as it is. So a lot of it was kind of all happening at once. But I would just get stuck in there and move stuff about and change it and try to change chords and change key and apply other bits and pieces, make things happen, back things off, put things in. It was great. I'd just practice with it and then do a few takes and see where it took me. That was definitely the vibe I was going for, something that was off the cuff, that was gone, and then I would spend weeks in post-production fixing it all. Well, that's not quite right. I did a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of turning up, turning down, added a little bit of chorus here, added a reverb, that kind of thing. Just a few little bits and pieces because I didn't really have the time to do anything else. I've made a couple of videos about the journey so far. First of all, starting off with asking the question, how the heck do you make a track on Eurorack? And then I made a second video to follow that up just to show where I'd got to after I spent a week trying to learn different things to make sure I had the knowledge I needed to accomplish the task. And I will do a third video in a couple of weeks, I think, once I've kind of got over the whole experience, just to go back through what I found, what I discovered, what I used, and how I actually made my own track. But the most enlightening thing that's come out of all this is all of the comments on the YouTube videos. They've just been extraordinary. I've been overwhelmed with the response of people's ideas, their thoughts, their encouragement, their suggestions as to how to move forward, what to do, what to use, how they and you make music. And there's just no right way of doing it. It's full of all sorts of interesting methods and approaches. It's just a fabulous read. So thank you so much if you contributed to that. It was awesome and continue to do so. I welcome all of your suggestions. And if you're interested in creating your own track on Eurorack and want some ideas, then read through those comments because it's a fantastic resource. I'll put up the 3 also ran tracks at some point soon as well, so you can check those out and just see what it was that I decided wasn't quite good enough. Or maybe I'll release those as exclusive tracks for something. I don't know. Maybe what I'll do is I'll release them to my patrons first. See, there you go. There's a reason for being a patron, is you might get early access to some of my musical tracks. Yes, that's a thought. And I hope now that I've sort of got over the difficulty of creating a track, got over that first hump, can I do it? I don't know what I'm doing, that kind of thing. Now that I'm through that, hopefully more music will come as regularly as I can do it. I talked last month about doing live streaming, and that's still something that I'm looking at, still something that I want to do if I can find the time. And maybe that's the sort of thing that I feel perhaps I'm now capable of, that I could set up a camera and spend an hour and it would actually turn out all right. I don't know. I have no idea if it sounds any good or what I'm doing, you know, usual thing. Anyway, moving on. So right, after I had to spend a couple of weeks focusing on writing some music, I can now get back to the normal process of reviewing products and looking at stuff and things and spending more time with it. So coming up, I have a full review of the Vermona Random Rhythm. Now, I use this extensively in the music that I made. It's a great module, and I really want to give it a good chunk of time and to do it justice, because there's a lot of fabulousness in those 8 sliders. I'm also going to be doing a review of the Erica Synth's graphic VCO, which sort of becomes more awesome the more that I use it, which is always nice. It's nice to discover more uses for something. And that also formed a big part of the sound palette I was using in my music making. And as did, of course, the Meleco Varigate 4 Plus, which I will also do a review of. On the software side of things, I would really like to do a review of Waveform 9, because I think that's fabulous. I also like to do a review of StageLight 3.5, which is a great, awesomely touchable DAW that's very cheap and increasingly awesome. There's other things like Reason 10 I want to run on the Surface, Pro Tools 2018, and Ableton Live 10. All of these things to do. How on earth am I ever going to fit it all in? And remember that if you like what I do, if you like this video, then please subscribe and share it around. Or even better, if you're feeling extraordinarily bold, you could head over to my Patreon page and maybe throw us a couple of dollars. That'd be great. Support me on Patreon, man. That'd be fantastic. You get, generally speaking, early access to the videos. You're going to start getting early access to any music that I make as well. And you get a direct conversation with me. I mean, what could be better than that? And it enables me to carry on making videos like this, to carry on down this modular road of craziness, to help me to buy some more shirts and occasionally put food on the table. So I will leave you with the cutest synths you have ever seen. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.